I'm joined here on the Managing Violence podcast by Bill DuChene. Bill, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
An absolute pleasure, my friend. And I've been passively watching your work for a number of years now. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a little while, and I'm pretty sure every listener of the show is familiar with Gavin DeBecker and Associates, or at least familiar with Gavin DeBecker from his excellent book, The Gift of Fear, and obviously the niche books that came out after that. But Gavin DeBecker and Associates, one of, if not the world's leading executive protection firm or close personal protection firm. And Bill is head of training for GDBA. So, Bill, let's just, by way of introduction, if you just want to explain what your role is and perhaps your journey through GDBA, how you got there and what you've done since then.
Sure. Well, actually, I started out, I've had two jobs in my adult life. That is as a United States Marine. So I joined the Marine Corps at age 18. Did 9 years, 3 deployments. I was coming up on a 4th deployment. My wife and I now have 5 kids.
Wow.
And it was our first pregnancy, right? And they're like, "Hey, guess what? You're going to deploy again." And we're like, "I don't think so." So boom, I ran into, when I was processing out of the Marine Corps, there's a poster out there that had Gavin DeBecker on it. This is back when we used to have those types of things at the transitioning class. So I was like, "Hey, I'm going to put in an application." And 21 years later, here I sit. So, I got hired on in 2000, right out of the Marine Corps. I started off as an entry-level protector. So that is, I worked a lot of night shifts, worked up to day shifts, worked up to, back then, a detail leader, then a regional director, and then a director. And that kind of puts it into a 45-second spiel of where I've been. But I've had the opportunity throughout my 21 years to fill several different roles. That is from a protector on the ground to a protector overseeing other protectors, to a protector overseeing many clients, and then to now where I'm at, of the director of tactics and training, where I get to oversee and implement all of our internal training. So that's new hires that come in. I'm responsible for that, running the academies along with my instructors, who are phenomenal. And then I'm also responsible for client training. So a client says, "Hey, we want to have first aid, CPR, firearms, taser, situational awareness, behavioral awareness training," then I am responsible for that as well.
Wow, so that's really interesting. I knew you did internal training, but I wasn't aware that you did client and external training as well. That's that actually just arms a whole bunch of extra questions for me to get into. What was the transition like from operational to training? Was training something you'd done in the Marine Corps as well, or was that something you learned as you went along?
So I did. I was the chief instructor for the Marksmanship Training Unit in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I was in the infantry the entire time. And then there's a FAP, it's called the Fleet Assistance Program. Basically, you do 2 deployments, you jump out of the grunts for a while. I was in the infantry. And then, some people go to the gym, some people be a game warden. I ended up at division schools as a chief instructor over there. So that was my first taste of being an instructor. And I think that was a candle that was lit that has yet to be extinguished. So I really enjoyed that. I re-enlisted, boom, right back to the grunts again. I got out and I moved into, obviously Gavin. When I first got here, we didn't have training. So imagine 21 years ago, there's a lot of different things in the organization that's grown that we didn't have that we do today. Mm-hmm. And so about 6 years ago, I was able to, meet with my bosses and say, "Hey, I think we're ready for a training division, having a clearinghouse where we can capture all this institutional knowledge so that when people come through the academy, it's not ad hoc. It's not, hey, I'm protecting during the day, but tomorrow's shift, I'm teaching a class," where that generally doesn't work out very well because it doesn't grow the material. It doesn't grow the knowledge into, let's say, hey, let's have a dedicated team of people whose core job is to educate those, the lessons learned. I wish somebody would have told me, and I'm sure everybody's heard this before, I wish somebody would have told me that before I did this. Well, now we have that. And we have a lot of, hey, this is what happened. And that's how history is created, obviously. Don't do this, and make sure you do this, and say this and don't say that. So we were able to do that. And now I've been doing it in the organization for about 6 years. And in this position, it's nice because I can also go on details. So if something comes up and they're like, hey, at heart, I'm still a practitioner. So a client says we need 6 people to do this. I have the ability to say, boom, I like to be on that detail and travel. So I would go do that.
That's awesome. So that's really interesting thinking about, you joined GDBA in what, 2000? Was it the year 2000? So you were right there for a massive shift in the protection industry. So what was that like? You're brand new into. Not obviously you got prior skills and knowledge and expertise from the Marine Corps, but you're brand new into a private security function, and then 9/11 hits, and all of a sudden, the whole game changes in terms of security. What was that transition like for you?
So it was, I would say it's more a transition for clients, right? So coming right out of the military, you saw evil firsthand, right? I traveled, I got to see a lot, and got to see a lot of evil that was out there. But a lot of people behind the scenes never see that, right? And so when it comes to home, all of a sudden it's brought, oh my gosh, this actually exists. And yeah, a lot of things changes. A lot of people said, you know what, if it can happen there, it can happen to me. So they have that epiphany moment. And then things change. So I was in California. I walked into the detail I was working at when the second plane hit the tower, and life changed after that. So, here in California, there wasn't a plane in the air. Obviously, everything in the U.S. shut down. And I remember, it was an apartment back then with just one kid, me, my son Tyler, and my wife. And you could hear the Air Force jets fly over. And as you hear them over, you can just hear also internally, like, society is about to change. And the question really for there was going to be how long? How long does it take for this before we go right back to normal and we stop doing these things? But institutionally, we just added that into there. Here in California, we now have weapons of mass destruction that you have to watch. That was implemented. That will be going away soon because people don't feel that it's needed for it. But yeah, I think people realize the threat could happen to them, and then how do they protect themselves? And although it was horrible having two planes fly into two buildings, and a third one obviously into the Pentagon, and fourth one hitting the ground, I think people realize, well, what if I was there, or what if? And then they said, hey, I think we need to start looking at our own personal security and how we can do this and what's out there for us.
Yeah, it certainly was a game changer for the private industry, and as you said, the practitioners were well aware of the risk beforehand. It was just a matter of people actually are aware of this now, and to some degree, I found. I entered the field in 2004, but that said, here in Australia, the risk wasn't mature at that point, or at least the understanding of the risk wasn't mature. And sometimes it was about reining clients back in, going, okay, I know you're watching the media, but you probably don't need what you think you need. Right? You're more at risk of dying from a heart attack than you are from what you think you're protecting against. But yeah, that's a separate topic. Be interested, backtracking, you said GDBA didn't have a training program in-house. So I'm assuming most of the protectors were coming from prior law enforcement, prior military, or from another training academy. Would that be fair to say?
So it was. I'll kind of walk that one back. We didn't have a formalized training. So what we had was you came in. We had an academy, and the academy back then, my academy was 5 days. Now the academy is 12 days, immersed in-house. You live there for 12 days. And so back then you came in and you still did standardized training, which Gavin always wanted to make sure we had. Like, everybody should know how to handle a firearm. So you had to go through that one. Everybody needed to know how to save a life. So you had your first aid, your CPR, your AED training. All of those were done. And then we just had some leadership classes, a policy and guidelines class. So that existed the first 5 days. So we had that 5 days, but the next academy and the following month, your instructors were probably different. It was somebody else who was off that day who came in, where now it's not that way. Now it is the same instructor, has the same talking points. It never changes unless it's being updated, but the curriculum is always advanced. So it's like, if there's new updates, we ensure that it's on there. And that has evolved from the 5 day, which I went through, to a 12 day, which a new candidate would go through.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love sort of over 20 years. As you said, the institutional knowledge is huge. There's so many operations, so many thousands of hours of protective detail, whether it's traveling, whether it's residential security, so many breaches and mistakes that have been made that have the opportunity to be learned from. And as you said, if you don't have a professional training cadre to capture that information, it becomes a little bit haphazard as to whether important information gets passed on and whether it gets put. It's fine to have someone who's been around a long time who can mentor someone on the ground, but if you can capture all that information ahead of time and make sure everyone starts with that institutional knowledge, or as much as you can transmit, then you're starting from a good spot. I'm interested because GDBA has a sterling reputation within the industry, not just from protection, but also from a training point of view. And when I started looking at executive protection training, there's so many different organizations that claim to equip you to be a quote unquote bodyguard that I think there's probably a lot of public misconception about what the skills of a protector actually are. And obviously this podcast, our hashtag is for the protectors, right? It's not about for the goon. It's not for the bouncers, although shout out to all my bouncers. But what are the skills for protectors? So how do you structure your training for a new academy recruit?
So just like every place, I'm sure they have hard and soft skills. We want thinkers. That's really what we're looking for. And so, this is not an industry where you need to be, 6'5", 250 pounds and you're benching 500. Is it a plus? Of course it is, but it's also a negative if you can't use your brain, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can't string a sentence together, you can't articulate something that you need, and we try to, get to that elusive yes, then you're really not that good. And that's what we really focus on. And you can't touch people. I think a lot of people feel in this industry, maybe because they see it on TV and it's bad, and it's one, it's unregulated, and two, there's so many misconceptions. I see training platforms out there that are like, you should never be doing that. You should never touch another human being. That's assault. And so we try to get people to think and be smart. And at the end of the day, even at the academy, I'll tell people, you'll do 1, 3, 5 day details, and at the end of each night, you shouldn't be physically exhausted. You should be mentally exhausted, because you're constantly trying to think, okay, how am I going to do this? What is next on this? If this were to happen, what am I going to do here? It's a mind game, and that's where you need to be at. Now, don't get me wrong. You do need to be physically in shape. You got to be doing these things, but protection is a lot about thinking. It's a lot about anticipating. It's a lot about being proactive, not reactive. And that wears you out over time. And so that's where our academy really focuses on, is just that you see this, we call them pre-incident indicators. What are you going to do with it? But you can't be receiving pins or anomalies and then do nothing with it, because we've seen what happens over time when we have that, right? I'll go back to the 9/11. You have a bunch of guys who are like, hey, I want to fly a plane, but I don't want to land it. That's a pre-incident indicator. What are we going to do with that information? And if we do nothing with it, then as history has shown, we know what the result's going to be, right? It's going to be bad. That byproduct is going to be a bad thing. And so here we're just trying to educate of what right looks like, so that you know what wrong looks like as soon as it rears its ugly head. So it's establishing those baselines. So we start that on day one, and we start to give the students pins so they can kind of catch on later on when we do this big debrief at the end, and they realize, I heard you say that, but I didn't do anything with that information. Just to pause you there, Bill, just so for anyone who missed it, pins is pre-incident indicators? Correct, a pre-incident indicator. Yep. Or anomaly. Yep. And so we give a lot of them out there, and we see them all the time. It's the verbals. One of these days I'm going to burn this building down, and then nobody does anything with it. Like, I get it. There's a difference between you and I joking about something, but the next thing a third person comes in is like, I really hate this place. I'd shoot this place up one day. Well, hey, what's going on with that one? We see these pins in social media, right? So from a training perspective, we let people know, especially like during active shooters, where does every 3-letter organization go to after an active shooter? Social media, because there's some sort of manifesto on there. There's pictures on there. There's comments on there. And these are all pins. So we are detectives of those things. We need to find them. We need to search them out. And then we need to go ahead and analyze them and realize, is this a threat? Do we have a cluster? Do we have enough of these to say, this is going in a bad direction? Or is it just one? And then maybe that's something we'll handle differently, but we have to be proactive with all this. And that's really what the academy focuses on top of everything else: the situational awareness, the behavioral awareness, the medical, the active shooter, communications, all the things that we want people to be smart and educated on. But it's only 12 days. That is your sipping through a fire hydrant. Mm-hmm. And I do believe in that old motto that, the butt can only, or the brain can only absorb as much as the butt can endure. So you can't really put a guy or gal in a seat for 12 hours a day, because come the 10th hour, they're losing it. So we do, the way that we break it up is we simply do, obviously, classroom-based skills, so practical application, and then scenario-based training. So we try to hit the trifecta in all of that, so we can kind of see how do we do it. And then when we get into the scenario-based training, it's under stress. And anybody who's read either Just 2 Seconds, which is another book, I'll bring that one up. That's really our Bible of what we use in protection. That's when we bring in the attack dogs. That's when we bring in the simunition or UTM ammunition, and the force on force. And then we actually stress people through that so we can see what they do. You and I can sit here and talk all day, and I can tell you, in this environment, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump out and I'm just going to grab that guy and go to the ground, until you put someone in that environment. And then you realize, old Bill there, he didn't do that. Bill didn't say all the thing he was talking about, Bill ended up, hiding or acting very poorly in that situation. So here we get to, put them in those scenarios now to kind of get an idea of how do we, can we mold them into something better? And by the way, we're not looking for perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect, right? I just need you to do something. We can, let's just say, cover an evac. Is there a perfect way of covering evac? Or do we just want to get the protectee off the X without injuring them? Okay, I'll take that one. I just don't believe that perfect exists. And if we can get to it, great. We can say we hit the mark. But if we got them off the X, then that is great. That's something that we want to strive for. But yeah, the academy's definitely come a long way, and we try to educate. We're not looking so much for size, but can you learn? Are you able to accomplish something at the end of the day, which is the preservation of life, our protectees' lives, or even their families' lives?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I love what you said there about I would have done this. It's a common joke that I have, but it's the easiest way for me to tell if someone's actually been there, done that, is how confident they are in what they would have done. Right.
Yeah.
Because once you've actually been in those stressful situations, you tend to have less opinions about what you might have done. Right. Especially if there's limited context in the situation. You're like, oh, I definitely would have done this. No, you haven't done it before then. Right. There's a lot of variables. And there'll be times no matter how well you're trained, you don't live up to your own expectations. So and that's why it's important to have a team that will at least someone's living up to their expectations on that day, right? Yeah. So you have a chance to feel bad about it later. But operating under stress, I mean, I know you guys do a lot of different stuff, and I'll share some videos in the lead up to this that GDBA have released. I'm blown away and incredibly jealous of the training facilities that you guys have, that you use. You just want to walk us through, like, what are the facilities at your disposal as an instructor, just to make everyone else jealous?
Well, I mean, I've always believed in this. Like, if you give me an acre of land, I'll make it the greatest training facility we can, right? I'll make whatever I can happen. And I have a team of instructors that are just phenomenal, and they're outside the box. But we do have one facility out here that we do use out in California, or in Glendale, California. We've just recently purchased our own. And so now we'll have our own dedicated training facility for just us in Texas. So that is new there, and that is currently, in the process of building that right now. We have a Gold Coast Canine is another organization that we have been with. We use their dogs. Rodney Spicer, he does dogs for the military. He does dogs for police. He does dogs for home protectors, or for our clients. So he has a great facility that we use as well, which is really, really nice. That allows us to kind of get in there. And he has his own shoot house, and just imagine just a lot of dogs there. But yeah, we've just been really lucky with some of the places. Some would call it lucky, someone would call it just fortunate, but we have a lot of contacts over the years that will allow us to say, hey, we want to do this training over here. Can we? And they'll say, sure, we can make that work for you. Look, we don't have our own driving course, but we do have organizations that we work with for driving that say, oh yeah, you can use ours. And we use their instructors, obviously VDI, AS3 is one of them as well. And so we've been fortunate in that sense as well, of having a relationship with so many different people that we can share either facilities, knowledge, and people, which is really benefits not only the protectors, right? Because they feel more confident in what they're doing and they're trained better, but mostly it benefits the protectee themselves, because they're getting a product at the end of the day that is fully trained, fully vetted, and is fully prepared for that, what I like to call 2 a.m. incident, when a leg comes over the gate and somebody tries to make entry into the house.
Yeah, there's so many skills that are I guess they're not required in a lot of other professions, and I think this is, I think I was reading the book. It was Christian Welch's book, talking about celebrity protection and corporate close personal protection. And you can come from a law enforcement background or a military background, but the skills of a protector are different. Right? They're nuanced, they're broader. In some areas, they're way more intricate than what you may have done previously, unless you've actually worked within a protection role within those organizations, of course. But yeah, they're very different. I mean, the idea that you're just going to come in and you're a great marksman, therefore you'll be a great bodyguard or a great protector is, I mean, if that's your only skill, you're probably not going to last very long in the industry, because the second you use that skill, you're probably looking for a new employer. Right?
Yeah, we talk people out. So on day one, we let them know that you're no longer in the military, right? So although there are some skill sets in there that we want you to have, right, but there's also some we don't want you to have. So like when we get to the range training, we talk about the range. Hey, when you're overseas and you throw a round down range, not a big deal. That's just the way it is. You do that in LA. Let me tell you, that's a big deal. Like I tell people is, I've been doing this for a very long time. And if you shoot and miss, I know exactly where that round's going to land. It's going to land in court and you're going to land right next to it. And so people need to understand that we don't have anymore, the ability to be safe, the ability for us to say, oh no, it's cool. I'm in the military or I'm law enforcement, so I'm protected. That doesn't exist anymore. And to be fair, law enforcement is losing that already here in the US. That's starting to change for them as well. But we need to get them out of that mindset that you need to understand that you're responsible for everything you do. Okay. So that is, you're responsible for every round that exits that barrel. You're responsible for every finger that may touch somebody in the line of work, your use of force. So everything that you do not only is probably being recorded. Here in California, you can't walk out on a public street without being recorded, but you own that. And we need to make sure that you don't come back with the mentality of, oh, hey, I'm the 6'5" guy, and this is the way I handle everyone. Can you do it? Of course you can, once. And then after that, you don't have a job anymore. And so you really need to kind of understand that for those of us who this is our livelihood, this is for our families, this is what pays my mortgage. You got to be very careful with what you do out there. And that's really where training comes in. Training ensures that I don't do something stupid where I lose my job or my livelihood, and then I have to find something else for work. I've been doing this now for 21 years. I really don't want to have to find a whole new line of work. It might be a little bit difficult for somebody my age.
Yeah, and of course, then there's also the court of public opinion and the change in reputation. It only takes one scandal, one high profile misstep by anyone, and it has dramatic business implications for the whole organization and everyone else who works with the organization as well. So that's incredibly important. And then you look at the whole spectrum of skills that are required. I mean, sure. I mean, the hard skills are fun to practice, and you can sweat and you can bleed and you can do the whether it's jiu-jitsu or firearms or whatever. And then you've got your medical skills, life-saving skills, but there's also just relationship management as well, right? I mean, yeah, I did an interview with the British Bodyguard Association a few months ago, and I made the point that I think a lot more protectors have been fired because they didn't get along with the protectee's spouse than have been fired because the protectee was killed, right? So if you can't manage relationships, I mean, that's going to be a drawback on your career, or at least your placement.
Yeah, on day one, we tell people you need to put a smile on. So if that means if you have to go to the gym and work on face and neck, then you need to go to the gym and work on face and neck. All right. But, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I probably mean mugged somebody maybe 5 times, all of which was overseas. And so no client wants to have their 16-year-old daughter mean mugged at, a rude stare as she's coming through the gate. So a lot of times people that are military or law enforcement, they haven't figured out who they are. And what I mean by that is this: when I got out of the Marine Corps, it was 9 years. I was a sergeant. I didn't know how to be Bill DuChene. I knew how to be a sergeant in the Marine Corps. And then when you get out, you start to have that mentality of, you start treating everybody, like a Marine, and you can't do that. So you need to figure out who you are. Now, the same thing with a police officer. A police officer gets out, he thinks he's a servant of the public. People have to follow him. He had a badge, he or she had a badge for something. That doesn't work anymore. And so you need to figure out who you are, but you should at least be able to do it with a doggone smile on your face and not be mean mugging, because people will like that or dislike that. And clients do not like that at all. When they come home, that is their sanctuary. The last thing they want is their security out there staring them down. That's not what's needed.
Absolutely. What do you think is the biggest learning curve for new recruits coming into your academy that I guess it's kind of a generalized question, because you have people that have different levels of experience, different levels of understanding about what they're actually getting into. And I know GDBA does a great job of vetting applicants, but what, from your experience as a trainer, what are some of the things that are the biggest learning curve for them?
You're no longer who you were. And I think that's where the biggest one at, right? So let's just say we get somebody who's has a bachelor's degree now in just political science, and they're really interested in security, and they come in here. They're a little bit easier to work with because they're not bringing any baggage with them. Oftentimes, military and law enforcement are a little bit tough because they're still living life through the rearview mirror. They got that mirror up, like, hey, boom, right there. I was 2nd Recon Battalion. I'm good at everything. They're like, no, the first 4 letters in background is back. That trash is behind you, and you're no longer 2nd Recon Battalion anymore. So you need to learn. So they're still living life through the rearview mirror. letting them understand that it's fine here to make mistakes because this is a training environment, right? That's where mistakes are made. And that's where we want ideally 100% of all mistakes should be made in the training environment so that you can, one, learn from them, and two, move on and build confidence. So I think the biggest challenge that we see are people with those backgrounds and a lack of something. I'm going to throw it out here, a lack of humility. And I think oftentimes people have that lack of humility. They come in thinking, again, 2nd Recon Battalion, I know what I'm doing, or whatever it may be. I was with SWAT, over here in Whittier PD. Like, no, you need to have a little humility. What we do now is much, much different. And you're going to see people younger than you who have been doing this longer than you. And so, you need to be a little bit humble when you're reaching out as a 40-year-old, reaching out, to say a 30-year-old, say, hey, brother, how do you do this? And so just be humble. And here in this organization, which I will openly admit, there's a lot of humility here. People here generally want to help others out so that we are putting the best product on the street. When somebody else does good, that means I do good, right? That means the organization does good. So we want everybody to be doing good. So we want to make sure that we're reinforcing those. But we tell people, just let things go. Your parachute is like your brain's like a parachute, right? It's not working if it's not open. And so we definitely want it to be open. Learn as much as you can, ask as much as you can. And, I don't believe in stupid questions, but I do believe in stupid mistakes. So if you're not sure, you should be asking. And that's what we try to get people to. And as soon as that guard is broken down, that wall is broken down, then we'll start to see them open up. You'll start to see more notes, but you'll still see some people who, when we start doing the drills, they say one thing and you start a scenario and they go hands on. All right. You got to stop that. You got to stop it, because this career field, you'll be sued. We'll be sued. And I like to tell people that, GDBA is one client away from everybody getting a pay raise, but we're also one lawsuit away from everybody losing their jobs. So we need to go through this together, use your resources, be humble, and ask a lot of questions so we can kind of move this organization together for the best of all of us.
I imagine there's also a mindset shift that has to happen between, I guess, a law enforcement response is it's about neutralizing the bad guy, or it's about arresting the bad guy, as opposed, and even in a military response is about neutralizing the enemy. But from a protective point of view, it doesn't really matter whether the bad guy is still on the street, whether the bad guy is still shooting, as long as your protectee is safe, right? It's about getting out of there. Is that a difficult mindset shift?
Oh my gosh, yes. So we'll see it in our shoot house. I can tell you, myself as one of the shooters, and my instructors who are shooters in the shoot house as well. I don't know how many times we're attacked. It's like, stop attacking the shooter. Okay, you need to get your protectee off the X. And so I look at it as twofold. One, that's not what we want to do with them, but two, it's like the bravery. Like, I'm always look back, that guy's pretty brave. He's going for it. And so I really like that. It's the one that does nothing. Okay, that's the one who's probably not going to make it through the training. That's the one who goes and hides right off the bat, or hits the deck and tries to get away. So those people generally don't make it. But yeah, it is a mindset. I mean, imagine you're training for years and years and then going out and working, whether it's in the military or law enforcement, and every day you're looking for that threat because you're the guy or gal that has to be making your way. And then you get to protection and you say, okay, stop. That's not what your role is anymore. Your role is now cover and evac. You need to grab your protectee and you need to get off that X and get to safety. That's hard for people to grasp. And like I said, we see it in the shoot house when the shooting starts. So their role is to cover and evac a protectee, and they end up running towards the shooter to try to disarm the shooter. So again, we have to educate them. Hey, look, brave, yes. But the problem is the numbers will always work in your favor if you go to your protectee. The numbers generally will not work in your favor if you go towards the threat. Because if you do and you're shot and killed, then nobody's protecting your protectee. That's not a good day for anybody. So we definitely want them to focus on that. But it's a shift, and it's constantly trying to, educate over and over and over again and drive that point home. Cover and evac, cover and evac. Your number one role as a protective agent, cover and evac. If anybody asks you what cover and evac, you should always, that's your primary mission, cover and evac. So burn that into your subconscious. So, it's no different than, I'm out with my wife and kids. If somebody comes to the door with a gun, I cover and evac. I want to get my family out of it. The last place I want to be at is in a firefight with my wife. No, that's not good. So how about we get them out of there first, and then we can reassess whether or not we want to go back later on a personal level, but cover and evac. And I think if we can understand that and we can get away from the threat, then that's really the best thing that we can do.
This is exactly why I think that talking to close personal protection professionals is one of the best things that people can do from a civilian self-defense or self-protection point of view, because the priorities are much more closely aligned. And long-term listeners of the show will know that we started off talking mostly about self-defense, self-protection skills, and it's evolved since then. But I think there's a lot more parallel between the close personal protection world, which obviously I have some familiarity with, a little bit of experience in, versus the military world, which is a completely different rules of engagement, completely different structure, completely different your resourcing, equipment, personnel. Like, you're not going to be caught out at 2 o'clock in the morning on your own, half drunk, right? Well, hopefully, in the military, right? So whereas there are going to be these situations where, and this was a big shift for me when I had kids, right? I went from being 6'3", 260 martial artist, plenty of experience in real conflict, and I was fairly confident in my ability to take more or less anybody under the right circumstances. But then it's like, well, if something happens to me and I'm out with my kids, then my wife and kids are completely vulnerable, right? So my priority has to shift. It can't be engage the threat unless that's the only way to get to safety. Like, unless my exit is through the threat, then I'll engage. But other than that, it's got to be get them safe and then come back later if necessary. But
And a lot of this is really just and I hear that a lot, and a lot of people do it, the self-defense, whether it's it's karate, it's judo, it's BJJ. I mean, there's so many different things that are out there. And then I ask people in regards to that, like, hey, great, but have you taught your kids situational awareness? Mm-hmm. So your kid can whip 5 people's butts. Okay, I got it. But he's walking down the street. Does he see the guy with a knife standing at the intersection? Or is his only role, like, I know defensive tactics and that's what I'm going to do? Now, when you compare that with something else, and like I've told people over the years, especially we do this with clients when they ask, how do I avoid this? Well, one, I'm not sure if I'm on a screen or not, but I call it the 1 foot life, right? This phone is your number one distractor. The bad guy loves this thing because the more you're on it, the better he is. The better he is at hiding. The better he is at sneaking up on you. The better he has, or the more successful he'll be in mugging you. So we really have to pay more attention to behavioral awareness and what's happening around us, primary. And then secondary, we have those defensive tactics skills in the event, something doesn't go right.
Let's talk a little bit about training clients, because I'm really intrigued about that. I mean, obviously clients can't be vetted for their aptitude and their attitudes and everything else. So how do you go about approaching that? Like, do you perform a needs analysis and tell the client what they need to learn, or do you have the client come to you and tell you what they need to learn? What does that process look like?
That's actually a great question. We are very forthcoming with clients. My job is not only training, but it's honesty. So it's like, people will say, I want to have firearms training. Okay, great. Are have you gotten a firearm yet? No. Okay. All right. You don't have one yet. We can supply one for you. Do you plan on training at least once a week or every other? No, that maybe firearms training isn't for you. I don't want, the last thing I want to do is give you a deadly weapon and then leave, and then it's out in your house, with your kids and all that. So, but generally we haven't, I think I've run that into that one time in my career where I've had to tell a client, hey, the best bet for you is not to use this. Now, with that, we try to educate and let's just say use of force type stuff. We'll say, obviously, behavioral awareness, situational awareness, understand what's happening in your environment, and don't get caught up. And I'll hear people oftentimes say, well, what's the best gun? Well, the best gun is the one that's in your hand at the time you need it. Well, what's the best ammunition? The one that's in the gun at the time that you need it. I'm not a guy who's like, you can only carry this and, only Glock and that's it. And you better be Winchester ammunition in that Glock. Like, no. Look, if I can get a banana to go 900 feet per second, I can kill you with it. So let's not get caught up too much on the damn ammunition and stuff. But does it fit their needs? And there's so many different needs out there where people, I was really surprised that many people don't know much about Taser. Now, I'm not sure how Taser is out there in Australia, but out here, you can carry a Taser concealed in like 48 states. So there really is no licensing out there. So it's an option that we also train people of. And they'll just come out and they'll say, hey, help me figure out what it is that I need. I'm worried about my daughter. I'm worried about my wife. I'm worried about myself. And then we'll review with them the options that are out there, whether it's pepper spray, whether it's Taser, whether it's a handgun, whether it's a dog. That's something else that we've discussed as well, all the way down into defensive tactics. And again, if that's the case, then we'll have one of our defensive tactics instructors come out. But we always pair, no matter what it is, whether it's pepper spray, whether it's Taser, whether it's a dog, defensive tactics or a gun, is always paired with mindset. And we want to make sure that people have and understand situational awareness as they're walking around, because a gun does no good if it's in your purse and you look up because you're on your phone again, living that 1 foot life, and there's another gun in your face. That gun is useless. That pepper spray is useless. That taser is useless. All of it is useless unless you actually can see what's about to happen. So we kind of go that route, and we're just very, very honest with them because that's what they expect from us. And so we want to make sure that they're, hey, you should be doing this. And I have clients that I work with probably on a monthly basis that will go out and do firearms training because they're committed to it. They want to make sure that they can still, in the event, have to use a firearm, that they can, and they can do so safely without putting a round through their wall, out the street into their neighbor's house and killing somebody on accident.
I find that from my perspective as a trainer, like I often have people come in and they want to do defensive tactics. They want to do self-defense. They want to do something physical. And then when I actually have we sit down and have a conversation about, like, what are you actually concerned about? Like, what's the scenario that you're worried about? And sometimes the worry is unrealistic. It's like, well, given the lifestyle that you live, the choices you make, the friends you hang out with, like, you are unlikely to get targeted for a drive-by shooting. Right, like it would be incredibly unlucky. Like, in fact, like here in Australia, if you're going to get shot at, there's a chance you've made some really poor life decisions that led you to this point, right? So the low-hanging fruit is not training against that; it's making better decisions. It's not being in dumb places where dumb things happen. And that's like 101. But I mean, that means that the risk analysis of a 21-year-old that goes clubbing like every 3 nights a week is going to be different than a 40-year-old who basically commutes from home to the office and back again and doesn't really do anything that puts them in a harmful situation. So then when I have those people, oftentimes it's things like, well, home invasion. I'm worried about home invasion, so I want to be able to defend myself. Well, the first thing I try and do is have a meeting at their home so I can see what's the low hanging fruit here. Is there anything like you've got your Jag parked in the front yard, right? So you're immediately drawing attention to the fact that you have wealth. Like, there's really simple things that we can do here that are minimizing threat before we start worrying about firearms or improvised weapons or anything else. It's
a lot of these people, a lot of successful people have their own safe rooms, and so the ability to, why fight it out when you have the ability to lock a door and call 911? That is a nuance that not everybody has. Mm-hmm. So some people do, some people don't. Some people are worried about, cabins. Some people are worried about other locations that they may own.
Yep.
So, the thing is I like the idea that they are trying to be an active participant in their own safety, which is great. Now, they may not always like the words that come out of our mouths when it comes to you shouldn't own a gun. That doesn't work for you. You should look at maybe something else, maybe a taser, or just maybe being more self-aware. So I think there's so many different nuances just because of everybody's got their own unique situations. Not everyone is a billionaire or a millionaire or a thousandaire, whatever it is that they may want to be. But also some people just don't have certain resources to it. So especially like overseas, with clients that are overseas, obviously a firearm is not really an option, and neither is a taser. So now you're looking at more of like, do you really want to get into a fight? Is that something that you want to do? Because we don't want you to get into a fight. So there's a lot of nuances, and trying to decipher between each one can be challenging at times.
Absolutely. Probably the last question I've got for you before we head into some bonus content. I'm really interested in the difference between operating domestically and in I won't say necessarily hostile environments, but at least in environments where you have to be very much more guarded about use of force and much more preventative in nature because it's just not worth having that conflict with authorities. How do you prepare is there a difference in how you prepare a protector for operating overseas? And also on that note, is there a difference in what sort of training you'd give to a client when they're going into an environment? So they're going to South America, for example, where it's not hostile, but there's going to be different threats to what they're used to.
Yeah, so there's a little bit. So obviously mindset's going to be the same no matter where we go. The gear and equipment obviously is going to be different. So I'll use an example. A few years ago, I was in Beirut. While we were in Beirut, the protectee wanted to go to a Palestinian refugee camp. So that can be a bit challenging, especially when the U.S. Embassy is telling you don't go in there. Now, how do you prepare for that? Well, you prepare for it the same way you would do any other detail, except for overseas. Here in the States, like if you forget anything in the U.S., you just go down the street, you buy it, right? Whatever it is that you need, whether it's medication or whatever, you just go down to CVS or any local store, you'll go pick it up. You get overseas, that's a lot different now. And so I found trying to get my doll, right? That's very difficult overseas. And a lot of clients kind of like their name brand of stuff, even though the active ingredient is the same, they'll want that. So you got to make sure that whatever you take with you, that's it. Because there is no, in certain places, I can tell you right now in Beirut, you're not running down the street to get something. So gear and equipment also will be slightly different. Some places you can take sat phones. Communication is everything, right? You want to make sure that you're able to communicate with the outside world. And then as far as with clients, yes, we traveled throughout Beirut into some areas that were questionable. We just needed to make sure that our individual who was with us, thank goodness we had a protector whose family actually lived out in Beirut. So they spoke the language, they knew the roads, they could drive. There's a lot that happens there. So we just educate the client. This is, look, any questions that may come out from locals, you just need to nod your head and smile and let the protector answer those questions, because we want to kind of limit those Westerners. So, just small nuances like that, where the clients are like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We'll let, the protector, answer the questions in a way that not only just for the arena there or for the environment, just sits a little bit better than some Westerner here out of California asking questions or trying to answer them. And let's just be honest, neither one of us actually speak Lebanese or the language, so we couldn't answer them anyways. So just not to draw any further attention, there's just a briefing of, hey, all questions, just smile, nod, and the protector can answer those questions. If you have anything, always relay to the protector first. These are areas that we plan on being in. If you plan on going anywhere out of that area that we have not advanced, then we definitely need a little bit more time, because we're in a foreign country that we don't know anything about. So we want to make sure that we're prepared. And obviously, if you want to go someplace that's different, just give us a little time so we can advance it, build some points of contact on the ground, have some sort of information rather than just getting there. And then, excuse my language, shit goes south. Then you're just not prepared. And if you knew you were going, then we can have a couple minutes to figure out what the plan is. But most places, at least in Europe, it's easy. There's always a language barrier. But those things are typical. I think like the biggest ones mostly is just gear and equipment. And here in the US, if you forget anything, I don't care if it's a thing of socks, you can go out and just pick a time. There's a store open here that you can go pick it up. And if a client forgets something, toothpaste, toothbrush, you just go get it really quick. That luxury doesn't exist when you hit some of these other nations that are out there, especially Beirut, Uzbekistan, other places that, one, you don't even speak the language, and two, you're trying to get a toothbrush. That's not good.
Actually, yeah, a non-protection story, but it illustrates that point. I was in Colombia in 2013, I think. 2013, yeah. I was there as an athlete for the World Games, and we had this massive police protection detail on the athlete hotel. It was a really big deal in Colombia. It's like we're on billboards, we had buses traveling everywhere, motorcades moving us around. Like it was a huge deal. And it was my first day in country. We're in Cali, which is not the safest city in Colombia, and that's saying something for Colombia. But I remember coming downstairs in my hotel. It was like 10 o'clock at night, and I just done my weight cut, and I was really desperate for some Barocca and some bananas. I was like, I just need to replenish. And I didn't have enough gear, didn't have enough stuff with me, and I went downstairs and I went to leave the hotel. And one of the police cadets pulled me aside, and he said, "Oh, where you go? And I said, I knew there was like a convenience store like just around the corner." And he said, "What do you need?" And I told him what I needed. And I went to walk past. He put his hand on my chest. He said, "No, you stay." I was okay. And I went to give it. He said, "I send somebody." I'm like, "Okay, all right." So I went to give him money. He goes, "No." And he just walked out, and then the guy came back. Another police officer came back 5 minutes later with exactly what I wanted. Never asked for money. He's just like, "No, it's not safe for you to go there at this time of night." I'm like, "Oh, okay. That's good situational awareness for me." I'd been in country for like 12 hours. But apparently you don't go to convenience stores at 10 o'clock at night in that city unless you're in uniform, especially not if you're a giant white guy anyway. So yeah, interesting stuff. All right, Bill. Well, thank you very much for your time. I know you're going to stick around and do some bonus questions in just a minute, but for those that are leaving the interview here, thank you very much. Look, GDBA is a well-known brand. It's a well-known company with high standards. You've built an incredible beast when it comes to training, whether it's defensive tactics and firearms, or whether it's situational awareness, pre-incident indicators, medical skills, stress management, security risk assessments, investigations. I mean, there's every single piece of the puzzle is covered by someone in your organization. It's certainly a thing to behold, and I really appreciate you spending some time telling us about it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate first and foremost the invite, and then just having your time to listen and kind of spread the word.
Excellent. All right, Bill, let's do some bonus round questions before those leave us here. Thank you very much.